Anureet, what a wonderful, privilege for us to have you on today. We thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited, and it's a pleasure to come here.
Awesome. So, as always, we begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toil without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, if you can please do us the honors by introducing yourself to our listeners and viewers and tell us about your amazing work.
Thank you. And I have to say that as you were doing the ancestral acknowledgement, it really warmed my heart because very recently I've started to connect with my own ancestors and the spirits. And it's something sometimes in the spiritual world, people feel as it's a woo-woo. And, we hear a lot around ancestral trauma, but I often tell my mom that I've been now starting to connect with my maternal ancestors, and I say, but there's also wisdom and medicines that is passed from our ancestors, and not just the knowledge. And that is something as women, but specifically women of color, need to start to integrate more of that medicine and embody that in our own body. So thank you for saying that. Um, my name is Anureet Kaur. I was born and raised in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and I moved to Canada in about 2009, so about 16 years ago. And I am a South Asian Indian by ethnicity. So moved from a very hot and humid city to now it's hot and humid here. I work as a sustainability manager at Softchoice. It is a worldwide technology company, and I'm as a sustainability manager. A lot of my work at Softchoice, it's a technology company. I think I mentioned that. Yeah, a lot of my work is around leading our sustainability strategy, roadmap. A lot around what can the organization do to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, energy, move towards renewable energy. Waste, and a big part of my work is sustainability literacy training, which is how can we educate our people. Sometimes I don't like to use the word employees. It can be a little bit colonial, but our own people on how can they embody sustainability at work, what can they do to be a climate champion at work, and also with their loved ones at home. I often say that every job is going to be a climate job in the future, or even in the present. So rather than having five Anureets, what can one Anureet do in the organization to make sure that she's inspiring? So I'm also a co-chair of Sustainable Soft Choice. It's our historically it used to be our employee resource group, but now we call it as our broader sustainability team. So lots of great work. We did get acquired in about May was the acquisition with Worldwide Technology that was finalized. So it's actually a very exciting time, obviously, with the growth of AI that's coming up for a lot of technology companies. They're embracing it, but also understanding that as everybody's moving towards digital technology and leveraging technology, how do we make it more sustainable and responsible for the future? So that's a lot of my portfolio as well. I'm also a professor and public speaker. I've taught a course on social impact at University of Toronto, Mississauga. That's where I come from. I did my undergrad and Bachelor of Business Administration and my Master's of Science in Sustainability Management, super big term, from U of T Mississauga campus. So that's literally like my first home. And I teach a course as well at Seneca Polytechnic on social sustainability. So addressing the S of ESG in their ESG executive certification program. So the program has a lot of progressive topics around well-being, equity and inclusion, Indigenous reconciliation. What does it mean for organizations to design a social impact strategy, and what does accessibility and future of work program look like? So very grateful to really embody the purpose. And what I've started to do a lot of my work now is, apart from the environmental sustainability realm, is climate anxiety, burnout, and where the nervous system plays a big role. I'm trauma informed. I've done a lot of courses around that, and also with my own healing journey, which is probably for life, because healing, nobody's ever fully healed. But what I'm starting to do is really understand that how can we bring nervous system in climate anxiety, as people are really facing that with the climate crisis we are seeing. So wearing a lot of hats, but it's just very meaningful, very purposeful, and just very grateful for the work I'm doing.
Wow, that's so powerful and very important role that you're playing, and the many hats that you wear. It's all so needed in this time. Like you said, you're coming from heat there, and you're in Canada. You're thinking, oh, it's cold. These were the words that they would use, like, oh, are you guys living in igloos? Now we're like fanning ourselves now.
Yeah.
It's so hot. So that's amazing. So what actually inspires you about the work that you do?
I'd say that when I initially started, United Nations IPCC used to bring, and they still do, they bring this report every single year talking about how the planet is getting warmer on literally a daily basis. And I think we've started to see a collective shift, because we also have to recognize that I was the I was the first female professor at Seneca Polytechnic to design a course on climate justice and environmental justice, because we can't separate climate change with equity and justice. Like, the moment we do it, the moment we don't really understand that those that are least responsible for climate change, unfortunately, are facing the brunt of it, especially in emerging areas and the global south as well. So a lot of the work I was doing initially was, how do I bring climate plans into the organization? But what really inspired me the most was I had so many people that, I've taught, and and they came to me and they're like, sometimes we feel helpless because we see all these celebrities polluting, and then we are told about saving plastic straws and, reducing single-use plastics, when there is a lot of emissions that's been coming from wealthy countries and just billionaires as well. And then people tell me, they're like, well, when we listen to the work that you do, and then when we look at what can we do as an individual that's in our power, they're like, we feel very inspired that it's not too late. So I always go back to telling people that there's so much that unfortunately it's not in our power. But what's in our power is we can advocate for good leaders to come, not politicians. That's different, but good leaders to come. That is in our control. We can talk to our loved ones to say, how is climate crisis impacting Indigenous communities and Black communities as well? Um, so I think that to me is more inspiring and more humbling. And I think the other piece of this is, as the more work I've started to do around really befriending the nervous system and how do we address climate anxiety, I've had so many people come to me and say, sometimes I wish I didn't just do talk therapy, but I also did a lot of the work around somatics and body first healing. And they're like, we've started to notice some shifts in the way we show up, the way some of the things that were triggering us is going less and less. So I think for me, that is what's very gratifying and encouraging, is to start to connect climate change with collective well-being. I think the pendulum has swung so much on the self-care and individualistic well-being that we are not understanding that when we sustain ourselves, we have to take care of ourselves, but then we also have to start to understand that how are we showing up at work and how are we taking care of the societies that we are working in? Because if we have a sick society, we are then on a sick planet as well, right? So for me, really, bringing together the well-being space, working with Indigenous communities, and working in climate, and having people come to me to say that there is so much that's not in our control, but what's in our control is how do we show up on a daily basis? How what can we do as an individual? What can we do as a society? And the last thing I say is that a lot of the work I do comes from a very compassionate and empathy lens. I think when we look at climate change, when we look at, sometimes there is some shaming involved, and I often say that, what can you do, from a daily basis? Maybe just take out your phone, and, I do a workshop around decluttering your digital carbon footprint, because if a lot of the photos are being stored in the cloud is taking energy space. So I often tell people, take out your phones and start deleting the photos that you don't really need if it's from a trip in 2010. And when you do that, you're reducing your cloud storage, but then you're also reducing energy. And then the pennies just drop for people. They're like, oh yeah, that is something that's an actionable thing, and I can actually do that, right? So really bridging the gap between climate and well-being, but also starting to tell people what can I control, how do I show up at work, and how do I educate the next generation as well. So my work is so much rooted in purpose, and it's exciting on a daily basis. I often tell my boss there's never a dull day in the sustainability world.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh, and I
Wow, that's
forgot to mention one more thing throughout which
mhm,
I have done. I'm also a board member of an organization called Taking IT Global. So
mhm.
the work I do with Taking IT Global is they have a program called Connected North. Softchoice is one of the funding partners, along with the big five banks and Amazon, etc. And what they've been doing is increasing digital literacy rate in remote indigenous areas as well. So at a time where education was taken away from them and also the trauma of the residential schools that came on them, Connected North is giving back the power of how they would like to shape their education. So I'm part of that board, and that's a lot of the good work that we are been doing with genuine reconciliation that we've been doing with indigenous communities. So I didn't want to interrupt, but as I was talking about that, I wanted to mention it.
For sure. That is very important piece to add. So thank you for that. And so if I ask you, like, what are some of the challenges or barriers that you face in your work? What are some of those?
Yeah.
Like, and also, like, how do you overcome them, or in the process of overcoming them? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think initially, and this has been the big issue with sustainability world is, when a sustainability person gets hired, sometimes that can also happen in the equity and inclusion space as well. The misconception or the myth is that person is responsible for actual of embedding inclusion, and that person's responsible for reducing emissions. But I think the challenge has always been that I think from our organization too, the leadership really understands that sustainability is important. But then sometimes, as one person, the resources are very limited. So that was one of the challenges. If I'm one person, um, my boss, senior director, sustainability and workplace experience, and this was all before we got acquired. Now we have a bigger global sustainability team across the world, actually. So the challenge was always like, how do we embed sustainability in different organizations, whether it's procurement, whether it's operations and legal. And that's why we had built this sustainable soft choice group. It's like really building those climate champions to say, how I can bring all of you on the journey together when the budgets might be limited and I'm the only person doing all of that work. And how can you be trained in sustainability? You take all of that work and you go to your organization. So with the legal teams, we've done, how do you address greenwashing when there's a greenwashing act coming up? And people then just come and say, this is something that I was thinking about my work, or I have a customer questionnaire coming and I think I can answer it this way. So I think obviously the challenge is when the resources are limited and you're the only person wanting to educate every single person, the onus shouldn't just come on that person to reduce emission. It should be a company wide strategy. And the way we've addressed it, and I always say, lead with opportunities and not with risk. We always like to bring that energy and optimism, because there is a lot of pessimism in the work, rightfully so, with whatever is happening right now. um, but that's why we are bringing the group in together, and we're telling a lot of the folks in the organization that how can you educate your own team and how can you contribute. We have folks that helped us with waste diversion. We had people to say, hey, I want to build a sustainable gifts guideline. We had done events around climate justice as racial justice, because that's really the truth, where we had invited a cardiologist from the US, and it was really interesting, and he had said that he noticed a lot of his Black patients in the United States, their cardiovascular health was a lot more affected than other racial communities. And he's like, when I looked at why, it's because of the close proximity of where they are living. So they are living close to polluting refineries and plants, or areas that are more flood prone. So their health is being impacted. So we're bringing a lot of that work and bring an awareness. And actually, this year for Earth Day, we also did an event around climate change and uh, um, housing insecurity and homelessness. So, how climate refugees, when they're being displaced because of a forest fire, how could that add capacity and demand to shelters? So, and then we have folks that are wanting to moderate those events, bringing, some partners in. So, I think that is how we've been starting to address it. How do we bring everybody come together? United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 17 is all about partnerships. And I think when we're looking at sustainability, climate justice, climate lens, well-being, it has to be a collective effort, right? So I think that is the way we've been starting to address some of that challenges. Is this should not come on one person to reducing emissions, but what can we do as climate champions and climate allies to start to, really collectively reduce the emissions as well?
Very good. Very good. Okay, so let me ask you, so do you have anything new, anything that you want to amplify in your work at this time?
Yeah, so I would love to share the article. It's on my LinkedIn. It's called I wrote it on Substack, which is befriending the nervous system and how it is so important with employee well-being. And the reason behind that is, we are unfortunately in the heightened of multiple crises. Started from COVID, COVID exacerbated it. And what I started to do, a lot of my healing and connecting with my own ancestors as well, was around understanding how does the nervous system play a role in all of this around collective well-being. And what I had started to do was I had taken some courses around nervous system regulation, and sometimes that word gets thrown out a lot across different social media platforms. And the courses I took was really to understand that what are some of the feelings and sensations I'm feeling in my body when there's something happening, when I'm reading a news around climate crisis, or when I'm seeing some of the political, some of the political things being shifted in North America as well. And the language of the nervous system is called feelings and sensations. And as I started to really understand my language of my own nervous system, I started to understand that if the body is in survival, and this is so important, I really want to emphasize, when the body is in survival, sometimes no amount of affirmations or even manifestations work in place. So sometimes we can say we want to manifest a peaceful world, and we want to manifest a world that's completely sustainable and low carbon economy. And if that's the wish, we have to tend to our own nervous system as well. So the nervous system can go in fight flight, which we hear a lot of times, known as sympathetic. But there are other shifts in the nervous system as well. One of the states of the dysregulation of nervous system. And when I say dysregulation, it's like there's no active danger or threat present. So obviously fight flight is one. Then when you go in the highway, the second is freeze. It's like you have too much energy, but you're trapped in your body. And then finally, there's dorsal vagal complex, which is known as the state of your shutdown. So, that's the state which actually in COVID, and now we are also noticing more people are saying, why do I have to do all of this work? Nothing else matters. And sometimes that happens in climate change and purpose-driven work when people get very, very burnt out. It's like, I'm doing all of this work, but the planet is still on fire. So what I started to do was started to tend to my own nervous system as well. And I started to work on somatic practices, or soma, as they say, the language of the nervous system. And to me, that shifted a lot of different things, because for a lot of people, and especially for racialized bodies and racialized women, the trauma is not here. The trauma is here. The trauma is in the body. So when we start to work with that survival energy and to discharge that survival energy, we can then take opportunities, and then we can manifest the world that we really want to live in. So I started to do simple practices, and I can actually demonstrate it here if anybody's interested in really looking at it. But that is what I'm really excited about. And, I want to bring more of that work in corporate spaces as well, because I think positive thinking, affirmations, talk therapy, that's all great. But 80%, neuroscience confirms that 80% of the information goes from the body to the brain. So if I keep telling my body, calm down, and the body can't calm down when I'm, seeing all of these forest fires and different climate disasters happening, no amount of that will shift my body. But if I start to tend to my own body and my nervous system, that's when I can start to regulate my own nervous system. So there are certain somatic practices I can talk about depending on the time, but that is what I've been really working on is climate change, well-being, but from a nervous system lens.
Exactly, exactly. Well, it might be able to tie into this question, like, how do you feel about the future of social impact? You know, how do you feel, whether it's Canada or global?
I think I need a whole 2 hours to talk about how do I feel. I will say this because I recently was invited to an award function for social impact by Taking IT Global. So the organization, I'm a board member, and they have a fellowship called the Sprouts Fellowship. And through the fellowship, they're engaging a lot of the youths to build their own small. So they're distributing micro grants, and through those micro grants, they're building small social impact enterprise. And when I was in that room, I kid you not, I came out feeling so energized, so optimistic because people were doing so many great things to address climate justice, to address mental health and climate anxiety, because, like I said, those two are tied, to um, address some of the issues that we are seeing in unhoused shelters as well. So I think when it comes to youth, the conversation is completely changing. A lot of them are really good activists. They're holding organizations accountable. They're going in interviews and asking organizations to, like, what are you doing for sustainability? What are you doing for social impact? That's not performative. That's not greenwashing. To me, you know, I was actually yesterday. I was in a BIPOC sustainability collective event in Mississauga at a cafe called Studio 89. And everybody was actually, this is a very timely topic. Everybody was talking about this. And I said, on this earth right now, we are going to see two collective conscious energies changing. We're going to have politicians that are wanting to dictate. They don't know what safety feels in their body. So when they don't know what surrender and safety feels in their body, they're going to go and control people outside. And we are currently noticing that. But we're also going to see a lot of heart-centered leaders that have done the healing, they're connecting with their ancestors, they are very purpose-driven, they are rooted in humility, and they are going to bring a lot of those conscious companies. And when I was at that award show, I could see a lot of the people talking about, how they've gone through hard times, they've been resilient, they've done a lot of healing, and through that healing, they've turned their pain and their wounds into wisdom. So I see that collective conscious shift really, really happening right now, where we'll have heart-centered leaders that are going to march, and those are going to be those Gen Zs and the generations after that that are going to hold those organizations accountable and politicians accountable as well. So I'm seeing that shift happening.
I always say that every interview I ever do, I always say, I'm hopeful because of the new generation coming. They are holding us accountable and they want to know, what are we doing? What are we leaving for them? What bags are we leaving for them, to carry this mission on? So you took the words right out of my mouth. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
You see it that they are like, yeah, we need to know who, what, when, where, why, so that we can get the job done and heal this planet and heal ourselves, right?
Feel ourselves. And when we start to, I think this is why this journey has been so spiritual and gratifying for me. And sometimes I get so emotional talking about it. When we start to heal ourselves, that is when we will heal the planet too, right? So,
That's right.
collective well-being starts from ourselves too. So
That's right.
that is what. And the last thing I'll say is, as our organizations has joined forces with a really big organization, Worldwide Technology. They are headquartered in St. Louis in the United States. We have a global ESG team. So everybody has a lot of ideas of not just how do we address climate change and how do we bring sustainability initiatives in Canada and US? What does it look like in Singapore? What does it look like in India? What does it look like in Amsterdam? And I think when we have those, more change makers, more trailblazers coming together to talk about it, we're unstoppable in that way. So, because climate change transcends borders, right? And a lot of the
That's right.
racial injustices transcends borders too. So I think, that collective well-being, when we all come together rooted for one purpose, that is when we are going to raise the collective consciousness on the planet and then heal the planet too.
That's it. That's it. Well, that's so amazing. Anurit, I really appreciate this interview so much. I think I'm just going to give you this last question. Just leave us with your closing thoughts and calls to actions at this time.
So, what I will say is that when it comes to being a climate champion, because I get this asked a lot of time, is does everybody need should everybody look for a sustainability centric role? And I say not necessarily. You can always be an entrepreneur in the organization rather than an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is building the systems within the organizations and bringing climate champions together. So wherever you are in your organization, join an employee resource group, whether it's for social impact, whether it's for, um, uh, advancing Indigenous reconciliation, because for settlers, that's also extremely important that we're not just talking about reconciliation on September 30th, but we are embodying and advancing it. And join an organization where you can talk to the sustainability team and say, if you're under-resourced, what can I do to help you? Can I help you with a waste diversion? Do you want to build a sustainable gifting guideline or a sustainable swag guideline? Can I help you with some of the disclosures around sustainability? I think there's so much work that we are now seeing in the sustainability world, and we need the talent and we need the people. I have so many people within the organization saying, can I help you with building a training on environmental and responsible usage of AI? Can that be a part of sustainability literacy training? And I'm like, absolutely. We need everybody with the skill sets. We don't just need sustainability managers and analysts. So I think that would be my biggest call to action is, um, while if you're feeling very overwhelmed, the first is to go and talk to your own internal sustainability teams to say, what can I help you with? What projects you have? And how can I volunteer to bring those projects to the leadership team? And I will, trust me, they're all going to be, because I get very excited when anybody comes and say, I'm passionate about this. I really believe it. And can I support you with some of that work?
Exactly. That's key right there. That coming together, collaboration is key to social
Yeah.
change. And, we have an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go
Yeah.
far, go together, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. And again, Anurit, we appreciate you so much. On behalf of SETSI, we thank you for coming on today. We wish you much success, much health, mental, physical, spiritual wellness to you. Okay, so thanks
Thank
again.
Thank you so much from my heart. I really, really appreciated the opportunity to just express and bring my own wisdom and my own gifts to this conversation.
And it's so valued as well. So
Thank
once
you.
again, we will close the way that we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toil without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So this is not a goodbye. I think it's a see you later.
It's a see you later.
Yes. Okay, dear. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.